hey, it's Wes, and it is time to talk about something new and maybe not as exciting as we had hoped. It is the Godox V860 Mark III. Let's hit it. It is an update to what is probably one of the most popular products in the Godox lineup, the V860 Mark II, which really paved new ground when it came to functionality and reliability in a flash, especially third-party flashes, because it included this wonderful lithium-ion battery, which had its ups and downs, as well as TTL full compatibility with first-party manufacturers' cameras, which is exciting. The two also had a full transceiver, allowing it to control other flashes while firing independently on its own. Of course, the Mark III inherits all of those things. But what does it do to, up the game? Let's find out. Starting with the categories, of course, as always, number one, build quality. So here we are with the Mark III, and you can tell that it is an extremely familiar design. At first glance, it looks like it might be exactly the same, but it's not. It is, however, close. If we investigate the plastic itself, it appears to be the same material, but it actually appears to be a thicker plastic. This takes a lot more squeezing to squish than the Mark II, which I can actually feel flexing pretty quickly. Now, I'm not saying the Mark II was brittle. There was one part that was. We'll get to that later, but the Mark III appears to be just a little bit sturdier. Speaking of brittle, here we are around at the bottom end of the flash. We have that highly controversial Sony hot shoe. Yes, it is still plastic. All Sony hot shoes are plastic, but this has the improved design, which has the full plastic edge, not just some plastic tabs on there. So that is an improvement, but it's still not fantastic. Thankfully, the bottom is still easily replaceable if you break it, which is small comfort. Of course, on the Canon and Nikon flashes, you are still going to get a regular metal foot. This is an update that came first on the V1, which you can see right here, has that same flat plastic design. It is not the sturdiest thing in the world, but it feels great in the hand. I haven't had any trouble with the V860 Mark II, and from people that I've spoken to, except for this stupid hot shoe, so this is going to vary from Sony to Canon and Nikon variants, they do hold up really well. Some people had mentioned that the back screen is more durable on the Mark III. I don't see that that's the case. On the Mark II, it was already a very hard plastic. Mark III just makes it flush. It looks a little bit nicer. It's still a hard plastic. It's not too easily scratched. So let's just end up the build quality. It's a 9 out of 10. All right, moving on to the feature set. Up on the front, you can see immediately there's a difference. There is a modeling lamp on the front, but let's face it, you turn this thing on and your flash is pointing that way. It's not really a modeling lamp. You might also say, okay, perhaps it is a focus assist lamp. If you turn this on in a dark room where you would need a focus assist lamp, this is obnoxiously bright. I tried it very briefly, turned it right back off again because this will blind everyone in the room. This is the minimum setting, setting 1, and then you can turn it up quite a bit higher, all the way to setting 10, which is very, very bright. Now, your mileage is going to vary on whether or not this is useful to you. I don't find it terribly useful myself. It is debatably more useful than the one on the V1. Let me show you why. On the V1, yes, it comes out of the head itself, but this light is extremely yellow, doesn't look anything like your own light, and it comes out of a little tiny LED. Let me turn it down so it might be more obvious. At the very bottom. And so it's not an even diffuse light, it's just kind of pew, firing out of the bottom of the flash. Neither is a fantastic design. If this is useful to you, you will know. Hey, if you need a flashlight and just need to be throwing some light on something, you've got that here. It is bright and white, unlike the yellow one on the V1, and it is there, unlike the one on the V860 Mark II. So that's good, I guess. So this is the same 76 watt-seconds as before, but the most important part is we get the improved user interface from the V1. It is easier to use, a little less confusing, and it's especially easier to use if you're using this as a flash controller. Whereas on the Mark II, things got a little bit confusing there. This annoys me a little bit because it's kind of an artificial limitation. They could update the firmware to have the same user interface on this without an issue, because this is a dot display that will display whatever we want it to display. Artificial, yes, but you get the new interface. On the bottom, we get the click wheel from the V1, which has its ups and downs. The wheel on the V860 Mark II, you just rotate it, nothing goes wrong. This one here, you have to be very careful, because if you don't gently rotate it, you push the buttons around it. I'm not a huge fan of that. Now on the back of a Sony camera, you have a similar click wheel, but it's not quite as sensitive. However, still kind of annoying. I would rather a wheel just be a wheel, like on most Canon and Nikon cameras. They've got a nice thick wheel that you just rotate and you don't have to worry about what you're doing with it. Also, we have the quick lock foot. Pew, pew. This has its ups and downs. Some people actually prefer the rotation lock, but I think most people prefer this quick lock. The head itself gets the full backwards rotation. This is as far as the Mark II will go. That's back all the way. And this is the Mark III. This is similar to what the V1 does, which goes back pretty far. It's almost exactly the same. As far as forward rotation goes, it's pretty much identical. And then, rotating about the axis, it just turns completely backwards in one direction. But when you turn it left, it doesn't go quite all the way backwards. I don't know if that's going to matter to you or not, but on the Mark II, it went all the way backwards left, all the way backwards right. I find this to be a little bit weird. I thought maybe my model was a bit odd, but it doesn't go any further than that. This is as far as it rotates in one direction. The other direction, all the way. This direction, not quite. Very strange. Don't know why that would be. Overall, the biggest change on this is the power system. So on this, we get Godox's new battery. We have this in the 8100 Pro, we have this in the V1, that replaces this battery from the V860 Mark II. A lot of people have had problems with this VB18 battery, after a while swelling and getting stuck in the flash or not fitting in the flash. By the way, if your battery swells at all, it is time to recycle it, stop using it. Take it somewhere that accepts these to recycle. Do not put it in, do not charge it, do not use it ever again. Because when a lithium-ion battery is swelling, it's swelling because the cells have started to degrade and are releasing a hydrogen gas. If you didn't know, hydrogen is flammable. So your battery is filling with a flammable gas. Not good, stop using it. These batteries, however, have been shown to be a little bit more reliable. Not only that, but this V860 Mark III is coming out in a time when Godox is updating all of their batteries, even their new batteries. So this is the VB26A. Let's have a look at the battery in the V1. So this is the V1 that I got on launch, VB26. If you buy a V1 now, at least if they have new stock, it will come with the 26A, which is a higher capacity, supposedly more reliable battery. So more reliable again. So the 26A has 21.6 watt hours of capacity, whereas the original that came with the V1 has 18.7 watt hours of capacity. And the VB18 started out somewhere in the middle there, because I believe there are 3 cells in this and just 2 cells in this one. So these are higher density, higher quality cells in the new battery. And one more item of note that a lot of people don't realize is this battery design was actually more unsafe than we think. These exposed contacts here, incredibly dangerous, because this is a high current, high capacity battery. If you short across these contacts, you could easily start a fire, melt the battery, spark something up. Not cool. Most lithium-ion batteries, these days especially, have these very recessed contacts on them. This is to prevent things from falling across the contacts and catching on fire or just destroying your battery. Although it makes it harder for me to test these batteries in my load tests and so forth, it is much safer. Keep that in mind. Some people say that the new battery is easier to put in, easier to take out. I don't see that's necessarily true. I got quite accustomed to the battery in the V860 Mark III too, so I could get it in and out pretty quickly and it wasn't an issue for me. And honestly, I haven't gotten as used to the one in the V1 yet. Primarily because when I'm looking at the flash, I never remember which side it is I'm supposed to put it in, because it's open on both sides. I gotta look inside, find the contact, slip it in. I should probably practice to get better at that, but you don't change the batteries that much, especially during a shoot, because they last for so long. I tried to run this one dry, but even after a full wedding day when I was relying on it more than I normally would, I just couldn't. One feature that I love that this now includes is the channel scan feature. This is one of my favorite features and incredibly underrated. If you don't know what the channel scan feature is, please familiarize yourself with it. It is super useful, and one of the main reasons that people get misfires with Godox flashes is they're not familiar with this. You can do a channel scan with the X Pro transmitters. I believe it's on the 8600 Pro. You've got it in the V1 here, and now you have it in the V860 Mark III. Now, aside from using those channel scan, you can also just do it with an Android phone. You can scan for Wi-Fi channels and choose the best ones, because a lot of the time where you are, channels can be congested. I shoot on channel 6 in my studio here because my router is on channel 1. Not a lot of interference though, our house is pretty far away from everyone else's. But if you're going into especially a commercial or downtown environment or apartment building, do a channel scan, do yourself a favor, and you'll get much more reliable results. It's great that this contains that because it has a transmitter and a receiver. Another update, which some people thought is fantastic, I didn't find it that interesting. There is a little switch on the side now, a hardware switch between manual and TTL. Yeah, that's great to have. I don't use TTL much, but I did use TTL at this wedding just so I could try that out. By pressing this bottom button on the wheel, I'm already changing between TTL, manual, and multi. Yeah, it's a little faster with a hardware switch, but it's not like we didn't have a pretty quick button for that in the first place. But if you like that, that's great. And I am a fan of hardware switches, especially for the power button, because you know when you turn that off or on, boom, it's off or it's on. I'm gonna be doing a video about phantom drain within Godox flashes a little later on. Please subscribe if you want to catch up with that one, because it should be pretty interesting. Hey, it's Editing Wes, and before we finish this video, I want to jump in here and tell you about my new, exciting preset pack. It's called Editing Your Own Photos. Let me show you. Alright, so we'll bring up a picture here that we really like, that we really want to just get just right. And so what do? Well, there are a few ways that we can go about this. Number one, if you're really getting started, you could find a picture that you really like, that you want to bring it closer to. So let's find one. This one right here. Really like the colors and the composition in this picture right here. So let's see what we can do. Now, if you don't know what all the sliders and things in your editing program do, feel free to just move them around one at a time and see what they do. Honestly, you don't even need to watch a YouTube video about this to get started. Just take the sliders, slide them up and down, and just to see what happens. And then, eventually, you will learn what every single one of those sliders does. We're looking much more wiggly now. So that's fantastic. So these things might take a while, but believe me, it'll be worth it in the long run. Go through every single setting that you have in your editor, whether it be Lightroom or Lumina or Capture One, and figure out what they all do. If there's a bar or a button that you don't know about, play with it. Up and down, all over the place until you know what it does and how it interacts with everything else. And also, if you want to see more image samples, check down below. Back to you, Wes. Another new addition is this actually has a focus assist beam, so you don't need to use this as a focus assist. Except on Sony cameras and a lot of mirrorless cameras, it does not work in continuous focus mode. That's a shame. There's nothing Godox can do about this because Sony simply doesn't trigger the focus assist pin on the hot shoe when it's focusing in AFC. So you have to use this in AFS, and sometimes it works in AFA. This will only trigger when you are in a low light situation, so you can't just plug it in and turn it on. Like right now, it wouldn't do anything. But if I'm on AFS, this will work. Now, I am almost never shooting in AFS, except in a circumstance where I wouldn't need a focus assist beam. I'm in AFC all the time, especially in low light, because people are moving around. My subjects are moving around, shooting dances and events and things like that. So it's of limited utility to me, but I know a lot of people have been waiting for that. Unfortunately, AFS only. So there we have a lot of features, but The game has changed since the V860 Mark II came out. We have new flashes that have more features now. What do I mean? Well, we have the Westcott FJ80. That is a flash that has a full color touchscreen on the back with a fantastically easy to use menu. We also have the ProPhoto A1X, which I was hesitant to take points away from this for not comparing directly to. That also has a great screen on the back, but way more expensive. The FJ80, much closer in price point. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And so there is a higher bar. Additionally, we have the V1 out now, which has the round head, which this also doesn't have. Round head gives you great, easy to use magnetic attachments. This doesn't have that. If you want to do that, you can put the round head adapter on, which I have and I use because I like to do that. This doesn't have it. So although in the past this might have been a much higher score for feature set, it's now down to an 8 out of 10. Solid offering for the price, but it doesn't have everything. Usability. So did I mention that this can be used as a flash controller while being independently controlled? This can be off and controlling 3 other groups of flashes. That is fantastically useful. Here we have it here. Here is the power for this flash on top, and then power levels for groups A, B, and C. So overall, although we're lacking that touchscreen again, which is fantastic for usability, and we're lacking that magnetic attachment heads, it's funny because those features are great for usability, so we lose points for usability there. It is another 8 out of 10. Light quality, I've decided to do some empirical measurements because of all the hubbub about the 8100 Pro having a greenish cast. So my methodology, I got out the color checker and did some flashing. Something important to note, as a flash bulb gets very old, it starts to drift in color. So I have an 8600 Pro that I have used a lot, a tremendous amount. And its color has started to drift. I need to put a new bulb in it, I need a new battery for it. But as you can see in my results here, the 8600 Pro, which used to be solid for color, not so much anymore. So just so you know, things don't stay brand new forever. How much have I used the 8600 Pro? I have probably run through that battery over 500 full charge cycles, so that is a lot. Now, if we look at the comparison here, I was actually surprised to see that we have more stable color and more stable exposure on the Mark III. Now, that was to be expected a little bit. We saw this to a limited degree in my overheat test, if you haven't seen that already, because we have the new battery, which is apparently more reliable in its supply of current. Once we have flashed all these flashes at least 10 times, we have measured the balance and the color balance, we have measured the exposure output of the flash, and so we have an average exposure variance of 2.4% from the V860 Mark II and only 1.6% on the Mark III. Now I would have to mention that these variances are so small. This is less than 0.1 stops. About 5% is about 0.2 stops. So we're not very far off here. Not a huge variance, but you can tell once you've imported. But if we look really close, we see something that we do expect already here. 8100 Pro, we have a very poor blue variance. It ends up looking like a magenta cast, sorry, a green cast, which it technically isn't, it's a lack of the color blue. Nothing too bad, it's all pretty close. And honestly, it's actually looking more stable in color than the 8100 Pro, the 8600 Pro that I currently have. It's not that bad. Exposure variance is a lot higher than these larger Pro flashes though. There's a give and take there, but honestly it performed better than I thought it would for a non-Pro just speedlight. Also, this flash being small and versatile, we can put it in an S bracket. It's easy to put into a modifier.
Wait, there's no second chance. We messed it up, torn apart in every way. Ruined the romance in a slow-mo dance. Now we're going under. We're sitting out finally. Give it all up, set me free. You already took all the best of me. We're sitting out finally. Give it all up, set me free. You know the one day will.
I'm gonna give that an 8 out of 10. It's not the best for light quality, but it's actually pretty solid. Value. This is more complicated than I expected it to be. I thought that this would come in at the same price point as the V860 Mark II, and just be a great value. But it didn't. We're not even sure if the Mark II is going to be discontinued or if it's going to sit underneath the Mark III. We'll find out further on down the line, I guess. So right now this is $230. The Mark II is $180, it goes on sale regularly for less. The V1, $260, just 30 bucks more. Get you that round head. Makes sense, I guess. And just to compare, you can get way more power from an 8200 for 300 bucks. Or you can get the same power, slower recycles, for a lot less for the TT685 for 110 bucks. Phenomenal value, but it's AA batteries. And then you have that Westcott FJ80 flash for $330. Fantastic user interface and usability, wide compatibility. Then there's the A1X, another third-party flash that's great, but it is $1,100. And this competes directly with the first-party manufacturer flashes, which are $500 to $600 from Canon, Sony, and Nikon. That is a lot more. So this is slightly awkwardly priced, but honestly, you're getting what you pay for here with regards to the Godox lineup. You can get less features on the Mark II, or you can step up and get a little bit more from the Mark III, or you can step up just a tiny bit more for the V1. It's up to you. You can go either way on that. It's not a smash hit, it's not a home run, it's not the most obvious value, but it is a solid value. I'm giving that a 7 out of 10. If you want to see more image samples that we see in here, follow the link in the description. I have more there, and as my life with this flash continues, I'll continue to add more. So overall, that gives us a score of 40 out of 50. Not a bad score. I was expecting it to be higher, probably just because of the value proposition that I was expecting from it. And also, the competition has gotten pretty stiff, especially from the folks at Westcott. So overall, it's a decent flash, but not necessarily the one that I can 100% recommend all the time. I thought it was going to be that, but it didn't come in at that crazy good price point where the Mark II is. Let me know your thoughts on the Mark III. Was it necessary? Is it a great upgrade or not? I'll get back to you in the comments below. If you want to pick up one of these, please feel free to use one of my links in the description to help support this channel and feed my fat cats that are currently napping. So, until next time, go take some photos.